Hello everybody, welcome to day 2, talking about literal equations here. Go ahead and watch that video on manipulating formulas, and you probably already have. Now you're going to write a formula for speed in terms of distance and time. Use S for speed, D for distance, and T for time. So when I think of writing a formula, I like to think of what units it's using. So I think of meters per second or miles per hour or something like that. So you take the unit, this is a unit of distance, either miles or meters, and then that's a distance divided by a time, right? Seconds or hours. So it's going to be distance divided by time is speed. Okay, so that would be writing the formula for speed in terms of distance and time. Then you're going to express the distance in terms of speed and time. So now you want to get d equals something. And to do that, you'd have to manipulate the formula just like you saw in that video. So maybe circle D, and then you want to get that D by itself. So by undoing the dividing by T, you'd have to multiply both sides by T. Okay, and then you will solve for the distance with a particular example. So this is kind of a concrete example. If I plug in that Rob drove 3.5 hours and that his speed was 35 miles per hour, what was the distance, right? How many miles did he drive? So you can actually plug those in. Once you've manipulated the formula, you can plug in the values of 3.5 for t and 35 for miles per hour for the speed. Okay, next you have a relationship here that Elvira is this cafeteria manager, and she's come up with some data relating the cafeteria processes. So basically, like how many students come in to the cafeteria each day, the number of classes, the number of lunch periods per day, and so on. And then she assigns these symbols. So these are just the variables that she's using to describe this different data that she's taking in. So, and then also it has the units. So S represents the number of students that buy lunch in the cafeteria each day. So the unit would be students per day. Okay, so this is kind of thinking about the units that relate to that symbol. Okay, and then you're going to jump over and actually apply a formula. So Elvira thinks that this relationship is important. So A is equal to S divided by CP. So if I look back at this chart, so it said S and CP, right? So S is the students per day, C is the classes per lunch period, and P is the lunch periods per day. So what I have here is the students per day divided by the classes per lunch period times the number of periods per day. So what does A represent in terms of the school and the cafeteria? So you have students that are coming in divided by the number of classes and the number of periods, right? So the number of classes per lunch period and the number of lunch periods per day. It's kind of like the average number of students, something like that. Okay, and then what you want to do is rewrite the right side of the formula with the units of measure. So I just put those here. So students per day is S, classes per lunch period, and when you see the per, you can always just throw in a division symbol. It's really classes per lunch period, then it's lunch periods per day. And maybe you can simplify these units. So when you multiply something by the lunch periods and divide by the lunch periods, they kind of cancel each other out, right? So these are going to simplify and go away. And then if I divide by day on the top and I divide by day on the bottom, those are going to cancel out. So it's going to be something like that. And then maybe you can actually see that as we simplify this, it makes a little bit more sense, right? Students per class. So that might not have been apparent just looking at these symbols, but now that we've cut it out, it kind of makes more sense on how it applies to the school, right? Students per class makes a little bit more sense. Okay. So you do that with, so does the expression for S make sense in terms of the meaning of the other variables? Explain why or why not. Manipulate the equation to solve for C, so like circle that C variable and you want to move it to the top, so and then put it by itself. So you're going to multiply both sides by c to get it up there, and then have to divide by a on both sides to get it by itself. So another equation, so just go back to that list of variables and try to figure out how is this applying, what does this new t represent in terms of the school and cafeteria, and figure out what are the units that are being used and how do those relate to each other. Okay, so that's just a little hint for you. So solving for the variables, again, you're just going to try to isolate that variable on one side of the equation. So you want to solve for a. So this is the goal, right? A equals something. So you want to get rid of this negative b. So you're going to move it over to the other side by undoing or using the inverse, right? So the inverse of negative b is positive b. So I'm going to add b to both sides to get that a by itself. Because if I take away a and I add a, or if I take away b and I add b, it makes 0, and a plus 0 would be just a. Okay, so each of these you're going to solve for a different variable just by manipulating that formula around. Then you're going to watch the Khan Academy and do the practice problems. This will help solidify your understanding of how to manipulate formulas, and then go ahead and write in your notebook the answers to those questions. Okay, see you next time.